Hello, welcome to another episode of Talking Stories with Natasha. I am your host, author Natasha Hughes Smith, and I am so glad to welcome back a previous guest, author James Michels, who I've had here once before, but he has a whole lot going on, a lot more than before, so he's going to catch us up. So welcome, James. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me back on.
My pleasure indeed. It's nice to have met you and to kind of learn from you, even though you're just getting started really on your literary journey. It's been wonderful seeing your growth and stealing some ideas from you. May not have known I stole some, but thank you. And you have had a lot going on. When I first met you and interviewed you, you had two novels. You had Ice Rising, and then you had just published The Ballad of Johnny Carlo. But
Yes, that's correct.
now you have four. So tell us, what you've been up to. Tell us about those new releases. What's going on with you?
My pleasure. So, the third book that I published is Ice Box. That's actually this book right here, right below Ice Rising, is the direct sequel to Ice Rising. Literally takes place like the same night that Ice Rising ends at. And what I did with that was a total change of setting for my main protagonist. For those of you that are not too familiar with Ice Rising, it's the story of a young man who joins a gang in the city that he lives in to protect those that he loves. He's got a great mind for business that he uses to kind of create all these like rackets and stuff, and he rises in power. So the first book in this ongoing series is about his initial rise, and just how he kind of learns life on the street. Icebox takes us off the street and puts us behind the walls of prison, where Ice, that's the character's name, hence the commonality of the titles. Now he has to learn, he's in a totally new environment, has to learn a whole new set of rules, and it's just a question of will his luck persist as he kind of serves his time there. And then my fourth book that I published is Life's Dark Corners. Now, this one was very interesting for me. It was quite a reach because, unlike the other three, this is actually a collection of 5 short stories.
Oh, wow.
That I wrote. And another difference is that while typically my main characters tend to be gangsters, Johnny Carlo, Alexander Ice Lincoln. In this one, I incorporated actually a few civilian protagonists in there.
Okay.
I really wanted to kind of get like a multi-genre, like collection of stories, like that was kind of umbrellaed under crime. So you have one that's like a serial killer thriller. You have one where more of like a vigilante type situation. You have one that kind of parallels the Ice Rising story of just a young man who's very gifted who finds himself, fate changing his destiny for him, so to speak. So yeah, and I just published that in January of this year, actually. And right now I'm working on I like to go back and forth. I'm actually working on the third book in this series.
Okay.
And that's titled Ice Rain.
Okay. Now, because I forgot to mention, we're just using the audio. So the third one is going to be part of the Ice Rising series. Is that what you're calling the series? What's the name of the series?
I just call it the Ice series.
Ice series. Okay. And you have a working title for the third?
Yes, that's Ice Rain. That's Rain, Reign. In that one, Ice has, he's I mean, I guess if somebody would look at the synopsis, it would kind of give away the ending of the second one. But Ice is back on the street, and he's reconnoitering his strength, his people, his crew back together. He's dealing with kind of the aftermath, the after effects of having been in prison. He is piecing back together his life with his family, but of course, things, there's still problems in his life. He's at a he and the leader of the gang that he's a part of, they've been having their differences, and there's been a tension increasing between them, and that may or may not blow over. So it's definitely going to be similar to Ice Rising, but it's going to be on a much different level. Where
Okay.
Ice, back then he was just kind of just on the street. Now he's really moving further up in power, and he's becoming more of a symbol, a sad symbol in his community and whatnot. So it's new level, new environment, even more rules for him to learn, and the fact that even though the higher he may go, there's still a plenty of hooks that will try to pull him back down.
Hmm. Now, what's the time span from Ice Rising to Ice Rain? How many years are we looking at
So Ice
here?
Rising mostly takes place in the mid to late 80s.
Hmm.
Ice Box takes place in the very early 90s, and then Ice Rain takes place, so far it's more of in the mid 90s. I'd say 1992 to 94 so far.
Okay. And that's interesting. I didn't know it was set in the past. I thought it was present day. So forgive me for that. So, what was your inspiration for setting Ice Rising in the 80s?
Um, I guess because eventually I want to bring the story to the present stage, but I wanted Ice at this point to be um a little bit older, so
Mm-hmm.
that he can really kind of compare what he's seeing now
Mm-hmm.
compared to what he saw when he was a child.
So in Ice
How things have
Rising,
changed.
how old was he getting started in the crime?
Getting started, he was 14.
Mm,
I put his birth year of 1970.
okay. So he went at the beginning, some flashbacks, I assume, well, no, it wouldn't be flashbacks. So, okay, so he's 14. Help me, my math is cloudy. So in Ice Rising, he starts off at 14, and he is what age by the end of it? I guess is the question I'm asking.
By the end of it, he's about 18, 19 years old.
Oh, okay.
And so when he's in prison, he's at the end of his teens into his early 20s, and then in Ice Rain, he's now solidly in his 20s.
Oh, okay. So a very young man. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Now you said going back to Life's Dark Corners that you didn't focus on the crime boss as your protagonist. So is it still a crime thriller? What genre would you categorize it as?
It would depend on the story.
Okay.
If you like, I can give you like a brief synopsis of each story.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, the first story is called, which one did I start off with? Shallow Seeds, which is similar to the protagonist of that story. Calvin is similar to my protagonist of my previous books in the fact that he is a criminal. But in
Okay.
this case, he's a very low level criminal, just a guy spent 20 years on the street scraping by, and he's been frustrated because he doesn't really have anything to show for it. He finally finds his own little kind of niche by happen chance. He finds his own little thing that he's good at in crime. However, disastrous results occur, hence the title, Shallow Seeds. Be careful where you plant
Mhm.
your seeds, because you may not like the fruit that
Mm.
uh, comes out of that particular soil.
Mhm.
The second story is, what was the second story? The Soldier's Widow. So here's where I really changed my protagonist. In The Soldier's Widow, tells the story of Janine, who's a woman who's in her 70s. Her husband had passed. She has grown children, with some of them having children.
Mhm.
And, unlike Calvin, Janine's, is a law-abiding citizen, a retiree. She has no enemies. However, she finds herself targeted by two would-be hitmen. And
Mm.
so the question is, why? What has she done? Why are these two men after her? In the third story, a lyric for Brutus, that tells the story of, well, was it lyric for Brutus or was it? No, I'm sorry. The third story was Wish Not to Remember,
Mm-hmm.
which tells the story of Stephen. Stephen is an amnesiac, wakes up in a hospital in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
and bits and pieces come to him. He finds out that his name is Stephen. He has a brother named Gene who is a police detective, and he's a crime scene photographer. That's what he finds out he is. There's this series of serial homicides in the city, and he starts to have a suspicion as to who the killer might be. So he decides to kind of launch his own little investigation. The fourth story is a lyric for Brutus, which actually was an expansion of the Ballad of Johnny Carlo universe,
Okay.
with Brutus being in Ballad of Johnny Carlo, Brutus is a bodyguard slash counselor slash right hand man to this New Orleans crime boss named Frank Abraham. A lyric for Brutus takes place 20 years before, where at this point Brutus has just returned home from school. He was a med student. His mother had just passed. He's reuniting with his father, and there's a gang war going on at this point between the old guard of the underworld and a young Frank Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
And Brutus finds himself caught in the middle. Then the fifth story is called a Fantasy Best to Forget, which is about Dean, who is a young teenager, again, a civilian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he loves the violent video games, he loves violent movies, and he decides maybe it's time to graduate toward the real thing.
Mm. It's very interesting that in true life that people don't necessarily set out to be a criminal, but something happens to them and they make a choice. They either make a choice that leads them down a corrupt path or a choice that leads them still on the straight and narrow. So it's very interesting that you have touched on that with so many of the characters. And the other thing that's very interesting to me is that you selected a 70-plus-year-old female as one of your lead characters. What inspired that? Because that's totally different from the other stories.
And that's what's interesting when we talk about that book. That's kind of the story um, that really gets the most attention.
Mm.
And with that one, I really wanted to break the mold with the Janine character. So I don't want to give too much away about what happens, but
Mm-hmm.
of course, Janine being a woman in her 70s, targeted by two hitmen, so you think she is just a victim waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
However, Janine's husband was a Vietnam War vet who had brought his service weapons home and had taught her how to use them.
Mm.
So I didn't want to go too far with Janine and make her out to be this like vigilante, like Jodie Foster from The Brave One, or
Mm.
Charles Bronson from Death Wish. But at the same time, she's not just a helpless,
Mm.
older woman either. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make a change for that, and I really wanted to kind of give her her own rah rah
Mm-hmm.
moments in the story.
Now you said that one of the stories was kind of you kind of pulled the world from the Ballad of Johnny Carlo and wrote one of the short stories. But do you see how you might take one of those other four stories and build a world around it, a new series, or is it just going to be contained to that one book?
Well, what I did do with these stories was they all take place in the same universe.
Okay.
They really have no interaction with each other. It's
Mhm.
all their total separate story. Um, but I guess what I did with the Ballad of Johnny Carlo when I wrote that book, it was so massive of a book, so many great characters, such a large setting, that I really realized I could do a lot more with that
Mhm.
universe, and I wanted to.
Okay.
So yeah, so what Lifestar Corners gave me was an opportunity to um, practice that expansion.
Mm,
And actually, it's funny you that we talk about it, because I already have an idea in mind for
mhm.
my sixth book once I'm
Okay.
finished with Ice Rain, which will be sort of a, not exactly a prequel. It'll be its own standalone, like the Ballad of Johnny Carlo, but it will take
Okay.
place sometime before the events of the Ballad of Johnny Carlo, with new, some very new characters, with maybe a few pre-existing characters thrown in there as well.
Okay. Okay. And lately, I've kind of been, I guess, enamored with this mafia thing, um, with one of my own books. But it's a very strong thing within yours. Um, let's go back to the Ballad of Johnny Carlo. Do you see yourself ever? Um, I don't know how it ends. Do you ever see that being another book about Johnny?
Well, that is a very hard question to answer without giving away too much for the readers.
Okay.
But I do plan to have more stories involving the character Johnny Carlo. But the thing is, he's actually one of two main protagonists in the Ballad of Johnny Carlo. The
Mm-hmm.
second one is Leisha Abraham, who's a homicide detective in the New Orleans Police Department.
Okay.
She meets Johnny, who at this point Johnny's a hitman for the mafia. At this point, when they meet, he's on the run with a different name. They happen to meet and they end up falling in love.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you believe? So with A Leader for Brutus, I was actually able. Frank Abraham, who I mentioned earlier, the crime boss in New Orleans, is Leisha's father.
Okay.
So yeah, I was able to kind of have also like a younger version of Leisha that I had a lot of fun with. I do want to have another story involving her,
Mm-hmm.
giving her own
Okay.
story per se, whether it's like a prequel or possibly a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's hard to say because everything I write is off the top of my head. I don't really have plans. I don't have outlines. I don't have a 5 year plan for what I'm going to do exactly with the story.
Okay.
Um, it was easy. It was easier for me because I was able to take the Brutus and the Frank Abraham characters, and when I wrote A Leader for Brutus, and say, okay, they're gonna live
Mm-hmm.
because they're in the Ballad of Johnny Carlo, so it's their origin story. So that's all. That's the only details I had with that story was, okay, I know whatever's gonna happen in the story. Neither of these two is gonna die.
Right. Now, a lot of times, or I won't say a lot of times, I know for me, I did not plan on writing a series. It's just that once I finished the first, I just
Mhm.
thought of other things that, I would like to write about, or thought about what could have happened with um, characters previously, either in the family, if not necessarily the ones mentioned in the story. So even though you don't really have like a 5 year plan, it was something special about Ice Rising that has generated, now is going to be the third book. So, what was different with that versus the Ballad of Johnny Carlo?
Well, with Ice Rising, I wasn't planning on making a series when I
Mhm,
started writing what would become Ice Rising. I thought it was going to be a one off.
mhm,
Then the story just became so massive that I realized I was going to have to,
mm,
um, break it off into a series, an ongoing series.
okay.
And with the Ballad of Johnny Carlo, again, I really didn't know where it was going to go. I knew I wanted to make it a standalone because I really didn't want to work on two series at the same time.
Mhm,
So I want to complete it, but that also left me with another challenge in the fact that it has to have a solid conclusion
mhm,
to the story. I mean, even when there can be a different story later involving other characters, I wanted to have its own ending, no cliffhangers,
Hmm.
anything like that. That's why I wanted it to be a standalone.
So with Ice Rising, are you, correct me if I'm wrong, did you have so much written that you had to divide it up into the different books, or you just had it in your mind, all of the ideas that you wanted for the character Ice? That
Um,
makes sense.
well, that's actually a good question. So with Ice Rising, I had to have been maybe 150 pages into it before I realized that the original point that I wanted to get to
Hmm.
with Ice was way off in the future.
Mm.
And so I wanted to um give myself a break from the series and try a whole different idea. Because at that point I was definitely thinking of the Battle of Johnny Carlo,
Mm.
and I wanted to um really test my skills because, like I said, it was so different, especially with the style, because Ice Rising, the Ice series, is written in first person,
Mm.
and I really wanted to try writing a book that takes place in third person, and Battle of Johnny Carlo takes place in the third person,
Oh.
and I wanted to, I love working on the Ice series, um, but of course I also wanted to have other ideas that would attract a wider range of readers, because the Ice series is amazing, but it's rather dark,
Mm.
and the Battle of Johnny Carlo has a slightly lighter atmosphere, um, for that would, for people that may not be so into such a darker story,
Mm.
they have something that's a little bit lighter for them.
Hmm. Now, when you're reading for your own entertainment and pleasure, do you prefer first person stories?
That depends on, I guess, the author. I
Hmm.
enjoy the Alex Cross series, which mostly takes place, which actually jumps from the first to the third person. It just depends on the book. I don't really have much of a preference in that regard.
Okay, that's a little different than myself. I don't like reading in first person because I didn't do any of that, so I don't want to say I. So I just threw myself off by trying to be funny. Um, you have written so much, in my opinion, in such a short amount of time. And I know you work full time, you married with children. It's like it's a lot. And I don't speak from experience. I don't have children, so I can only imagine. So from my imagination, it's a lot. How do you find time to write?
You gotta get creative, and thankfully, I'm an early riser. I get up at about 4 o'clock in the morning every single day, even on my days off, and that's when I really find a lot of time to write, because my kids normally don't wake up till about 6:30, 7 o'clock.
Mm,
So I give myself a word count to do on my days off that I
okay.
reach every single day. And then on my work days, typically that's when I'll go out and on my lunch break, I'll get my writing done.
So you set a writing goal, so of a word count. So how many hours do you sit and write daily, and what would that word count be generally?
For me, it's not really exactly a time,
Okay.
but as much as what's produced.
Mm,
So for me, I'm like on my days off, that's when I set my word count, because my
mm,
lunch break can vary. Um, but I set myself a goal of 1,000 words.
okay.
So I write 1,000 words and then I stop. Maybe I go a little over sometimes,
Hmm.
but that's what I do. And even when the scene has I'm building some momentum, I'm able to start back up the next time. And it also helps kind of keep the creative juices flowing when I have a strong beginning
Hmm.
for the next time where I sit down and write.
Hmm. Okay, wow, wow. Look, I can do you always feel inspired though during these times?
Definitely, definitely. It's interesting for me because, like I said, I shoot from the hip. I have no plan, so I freestyle all my writing. So
Okay.
it's amazing to really see where the stories are going to lead.
Mm,
Even I can't, even I can't say for certain how each story is going to end. What's going to happen to each character? There
oh,
may be, there may be one or two in each story that I write where I'll say to myself, okay, like this person's definitely gonna bite it, or this
mhm,
person's definitely going to live to tell the tale. But most everybody else will
mhm.
kind of see this how the story's progressing. So it's a surprise even to myself.
So, is there one particular story that was a bigger surprise on the ending that you thought you were going to go in one direction, and then once you started progressing towards the end, you completely changed it up?
That would probably have to be the Ballad of Johnny Carlo.
Mm,
I don't want to give away what the ending was originally going to be.
mhm,
Um, let's just say that again, because the Ice series can be rather very dark. I wanted to give the Battle of Johnny Carlo a different atmosphere, and
mm,
I'll kind of leave it at that. I know
mhm.
that's very vague and very mysterious for the readers, but anybody that reads the Battle of Johnny Carlo, you are more than welcome to contact me.
Mhm.
However you prefer, and then I would gladly tell you how I was going to end the story, and then you'll probably thank me that I didn't end it like that.
Right. um, if you were to rate your books, like if they were to be made into a movie and they were produced exactly as they're written, what type of rating would you give them as far as
Oh,
theatrical rating, like, PG-13, R?
R.
Okay,
They would all be R.
that's for all four.
Yes, except maybe. Um, I mean, if you took my short stories and made them into individual movies,
Mhm.
no, actually, you know what? Strike that. No, they would all be R.
Okay, so lots of action, a little violence, uh,
Yes.
et cetera. Real life, the way the mob really is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, James, let us know where the listeners can purchase your books.
So all my books are available on Amazon. That's Ice Rising, Icebox, The Ballad of Johnny Carlo, and Life Star Corners. They're all available on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. And The Ballad of Johnny Carlo also has a hardcover. For those of you that are interested, I also have a website called jamesmichaelsbooks.com that
Mhm.
which has all my books on there. If you click on them, it'll hyperlink you to Amazon where you can purchase them. There's also my email subscription that's on there. So if you want to stay updated on new books I have coming out, events, deals, content, things of that nature, please sign up. And then my personal email is also on there if anybody would wish to contact me directly. I'd love to. I'm always available.
Oh, awesome. Now, have you had any thought to making your books available on Audible?
I actually am looking into possibly having one of them available in Audible sometime this year. I'm actually doing some. I'm a little hesitant on it just because it's something I want to do. I just don't know if it's the right time for myself yet.
Hmm. Well, definitely, you want to do it if you think it's right for you, but um, definitely consider it. It's a whole different market out there for people who listen to Audible for various reasons, eyesight issues, concentration issues. It's just a whole new world of readers that you could reach with Audible.
Definitely.
Definitely, if you decide to do it, don't do one. It's better to do them all, so it's all balanced, because that, just like with your series, one's going to help the others to get sales. If you have multiple in that audiobook, it's just going to help the rest to get the sales as well. And where are you going to be? Upcoming events where people can meet you in person, talk to you, get signed copies of your books.
So I'll actually be at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center in Jackson, Michigan this Saturday. That's April 22nd. I'll be there from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. I will be there all day with copies of each of my books. So anybody that would love to come by and check them out, I'm selling them all. I've signed each and every single copy. And there's a discount if you buy more than one copy at a time.
Awesome. Okay. Well, James, it has been a pleasure having you on. Definitely want you to stay on and talk to me afterwards. But thank you, everyone. This has been another episode of Talking Stories with Natasha, and thank you for listening.